Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It had only been a few weeks since Lily Winters had given in to the whirlwind of passion that caught her off guard with Damon, the mysterious man whose presence had upended not only her sense of loyalty but her very rhythm of life. And although she had tried to dismiss the lingering unease in her body as nothing more than the side effects of stress, late nights, and the exhausting tug-of-war between Kane and her family's expectations, deep down Lily could not shake the feeling that something was shifting inside her, something subtle yet undeniable, the way her mornings had suddenly begun with waves of nausea, the way her body seemed more sensitive than usual, the way she noticed faint but persistent fatigue settling into her bones, and while she assured herself that stress was the obvious culprit, every passing day made that excuse ring hollow, because Damon's presence haunted her thoughts not just emotionally but physically, as though a part of him had already begun rooting itself deep within her, and that part was something she could neither escape nor confess, at least not yet, for Lily prided herself on control, on keeping her world from spinning out of bounds, but pregnancy was not part of the plan, not now, not when every move she made was scrutinized by family, friends, rivals, and lovers who would weaponize her vulnerability the moment they sensed it. And yet the body does not lie, no matter how much the mind argues otherwise. So when Lily found herself staring at the calendar, realizing with a sudden jolt that her cycle was late, her heart thundered in her chest as the question whispered louder than any voice could. How soon until she had to face the truth? How soon until she could no longer dismiss the signs? How soon until she realized she was pregnant with Damon's baby? And as Lily Winters tried to carry on with her daily life at Chancellor Winters, balancing boardroom battles, family squabbles, and Kane's relentless attempts to drag her back into his orbit, she couldn't ignore how every small change in her body seemed to demand attention, how the scent of coffee in the break room suddenly turned her stomach, how she found herself craving food she hadn't touched in years, how moments of dizziness crept up on her at the worst times, almost exposing her secret, before she was even ready to acknowledge it herself, and she thought back to that night with Damon, the night where lines blurred and her self-control melted into something raw and reckless, the night that had been equal parts escape and surrender, and now that night replayed in her mind with new meaning, because every flutter of nausea, every skipped meal, every lingering glance at the calendar carried the echo of his touch, reminding her that choices always carry consequences, even when the heart is too fragile to accept them. And though Lily had always prided herself on being level-headed, on being the grounded Winters sibling, the one who made careful choices in contrast to Devon's impulsive decisions or Nate's ruthless ambition, she found herself standing on the edge of a secret that could tear her world apart. For if she truly was pregnant with Damon's baby, it wouldn't just complicate her life, it would ignite a firestorm across Genoa City, dragging Kane, Devon, Nate, Jill, and even Victor into the fallout. Because nothing about Lily's life ever unfolded in isolation. Everything was woven into the messy, overlapping fabric of alliances and rivalries, and she knew that once the truth came out, it wouldn't be long before her pregnancy became not just personal but political, a pawn in power play she couldn't even predict, and that realization weighed on her heavier than the physical symptoms, heavier than the waves of fatigue, heavier than the unspoken truth forming in the pit of her stomach, because this wasn't just about her body changing, this was about the future of her family, the future of Damon's place in her life, and the undeniable fact that Kane would never let her quietly navigate this revelation without turning it into a battle for control. The days blurred into one another, each one carrying new hints that Lily's denial could no longer sustain itself, and yet she clung to the hope that maybe she was mistaken, maybe stress had thrown her cycle off, maybe her cravings were just the result of late-night work sessions and skipped meals, maybe the exhaustion came from balancing too much on her shoulders. But the human heart knows the truth long before the mind allows it, and Lily felt it deep inside, the way she would instinctively press her hand against her stomach without even realizing it, the way her reflection in the mirror seemed subtly different, softer somehow, more aware of a secret blooming within, and in her private moments she would whisper to herself the possibility she couldn't yet say out loud. Damon's baby, Damon's child, Damon's unexpected legacy growing inside her, and with that whisper came a rush of fear, guilt, and oddly enough, an unbidden sense of joy, because for all the chaos Damon had brought into her life, for all the uncertainty tied to his shadowy past and dangerous connections, there was also something thrilling about the possibility of carrying his child, something that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years, as though fate itself had conspired to give her a storyline she hadn't written for herself, one that might just redefine her entire identity. But the joy was fleeting, smothered almost instantly by dread. For how could she possibly explain this to her family, to her children, to Cain, and most terrifying of all, to Damon himself, who might not even want this complication, who might see her pregnancy as nothing more than leverage or liability, and the uncertainty of his reaction haunted her as much as the looming certainty of her condition. It wasn't just about how soon Lily would realize she was pregnant, it was also about how soon she would admit it to herself, because realization and acceptance are two different battles, and Lily was still caught in between, still testing herself with subtle hints, still buying pregnancy tests and tucking them deep into her purse only to avoid using them, still searching for excuses to delay the inevitable. And yet the body grows louder than the mind with each passing week, each skipped cycle, each restless night, and soon there would be no denying it. Soon her clothes would fit differently, soon her energy would betray her in public meetings, soon someone else would notice before she even confessed, and that terrified her more than anything, because control had always been her armor, but pregnancy is the one secret a woman cannot control forever. And as much as Lily wanted to bury her head in work and avoid the storm, she could already feel the thunder rolling in the distance, waiting to break across her carefully constructed life. Damon himself remained a haunting presence, never far from her thoughts, his enigmatic charm and dangerous aura making her both crave and fear him in equal measure. And she couldn't help but wonder if fate had played a cruel trick by binding her to him in such an irreversible way, because Lily knew what it meant to bring a child into this world under complicated circumstances. She knew how whispers and judgments would follow her. She knew that Cain, ever possessive, would use the pregnancy to question her morals, her judgment, her very worth as a mother. And yet Cain's voice wasn't the one that echoed in her heart in those quiet hours of uncertainty. It was Damon's, the memory of his promises, his intensity, his unspoken vulnerability that peeked through when he thought no one was watching. And Lily wondered if perhaps this baby, if indeed she was pregnant, could be more than a complication. Perhaps it could be the beginning of something neither she nor Damon had ever imagined. Though even as the thought surfaced it frightened her, because dreams have always been dangerous in Genoa City, fragile illusions that shatter the moment they collide with reality, and reality was waiting just around the corner, ready to strip away her denial and force her to confront the truth. And so Lily walked through her days in a state of quiet suspension, carrying a secret she hadn't yet proven but already believed, asking herself with each passing hour not just how soon until she realized the truth, but how soon until she could no longer hide it, how soon until she had to face Damon with trembling hands and whispered words, how soon until Cain confronted her with suspicions sharpened into accusations, how soon until Devon, Nate, Jill, and everyone else pieced together what she was too afraid to say, and most of all, how soon until she stopped running from herself, stopped living in the fragile space between denial and acceptance, stopped pretending she could control the uncontrollable, because a child is not a secret that can stay buried. A child is a truth that grows louder, stronger, and more undeniable with each passing day. And Lily Winters, whether she liked it or not, was already on the path toward that truth, already on the path toward realizing she was carrying Damon's baby, already walking toward a future that would change her life forever. And though she didn't yet know the timing, the question wasn't if she would realize it, but when, and with every passing sunrise that when drew closer, pressing in on her until she could no longer breathe without tasting the inevitability of it, until her reflection in the mirror wasn't just Lily anymore, but Lily with a secret, Lily with a life inside her, Lily with Damon's child shaping her destiny in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. And so the countdown had already begun, ticking silently in her heart, whispering with every skipped beat, every restless night, every hand pressed to her stomach, whispering that realization wasn't far away at all. It was imminent, and once it arrived, there would be no turning back. And yet, as the days stretched on, Lily Winters found herself drifting deeper into the storm of what ifs and maybes, a place where every second carried the weight of both hope and dread, because pregnancy wasn't just about the physical signs or the ticking of her body's hidden clock. It was about the way the very air around her seemed to hum with change, the way conversations she overheard took on double meanings, the way every glance from those closest to her felt like an accusation, though in reality no one knew anything yet. But Lily's conscience made her see suspicion in every eye, hear judgment in every voice, as if the entire city were already whispering about her and Damon, already calculating the scandal that would unfold the moment her secret slipped free. And the cruelest part of it all was that she couldn't tell if the emotions building inside her were hers alone or if they were influenced by the tiny possibility blooming within her body, that small cluster of cells that, if real, would become a child, Damon's child, a living, breathing reminder of a night she both longed for and regretted. And though she wanted to cling to the possibility that she could control the narrative, she knew better than anyone that Genoa City thrived on secrets, on exposing them, weaponizing them, devouring them. And a pregnancy could never stay hidden for long, especially not when Cain Ashby lurked at every corner, pretending to have moved on while sharpening his instincts for weakness in Lily's armor. Because Cain knew her too well, Cain could read her tells better than anyone. And the moment she faltered even slightly, he would pounce, he would dig until he unearthed the truth, and he would use it not just to hurt her but to drag her back into his tangled web of possessiveness, because Cain had never truly let her go. And the thought of him discovering Damon's connection to her pregnancy made Lily's stomach twist in ways that had nothing to do with morning sickness. It was fear, pure and suffocating. Because Cain wouldn't just rage, he would retaliate, he would strike Damon, he would spin lies for their children, he would ruin Lily's reputation piece by piece until she questioned her very worth. And Damon, for all his charisma and intensity, might not be able to shield her from Cain's wrath, because Damon himself was unpredictable. A man with a past that could be used against him at any moment. And Lily was caught between these two forces, her ex-husband's vindictive obsession and Damon's volatile passion. While inside her, silent and unseen, a new life might already be taking root, and she alone carried the burden of deciding how and when the world would know. Nights became the hardest, because when Lily was alone, stripped of the distractions of work and family, her thoughts turned inward, looping endlessly through scenarios that alternated between dream and nightmare. One moment imagining Damon holding her hand as she revealed the news, his dark eyes softening in a way she had only glimpsed in rare, unguarded moments. The next moment picturing him recoiling, distancing himself, claiming he wasn't ready, wasn't capable, wasn't willing to take on the responsibility of fatherhood. And the pendulum swing between those extremes kept her awake until dawn, leaving her more exhausted, more vulnerable, more certain that she couldn't carry this burden alone for much longer. And yet every time she picked up her phone to call him, to confess, to even hint at what she suspected, her courage faltered, because once the words left her lips there would be no taking them back, no pretending it was all in her head, no hiding behind excuses, and Lily wasn't ready for that finality, not when she hadn't even confirmed the truth herself, because the pregnancy test she had bought still lay unopened, buried in the back of her drawer like forbidden relics, silent but powerful, waiting to deliver either confirmation or release. And Lily couldn't decide which outcome terrified her more, because both would change everything. A positive test would force her into acceptance. A negative test would bring relief but also grief, the kind of grief that comes from realizing that for all the fear she carried, a small part of her had already begun to hope, already begun to imagine Damon's child, already begun to see herself holding a baby that wasn't Cain's, a baby that represented freedom, change, maybe even redemption. And letting go of that vision might hurt more than she dared admit. At Chancellor Winter's, her colleagues noticed she seemed distracted, but no one pressed too hard yet, not even Devon, who had always been the most perceptive, and Lily was grateful for that temporary reprieve, though she knew it wouldn't last, because Devon had a way of reading between her silences, and if she kept drifting through meetings with glassy eyes and tapping her stomach absently under the table, he would eventually corner her, demand the truth, and then she would be faced with a choice, confess to her brother or lie to him, both options unthinkable in their own way. And the thought of dragging Devon into the secret before Damon himself only made her feel more guilty, more torn, more trapped in a situation where every path forward seemed paved with heartbreak, betrayal, or explosive consequences. Because no matter how she timed it, no matter how she framed it, someone was going to be hurt, someone was going to feel blindsided. And once the secret was out, there would be no rewinding the clock to that brief moment of denial when the truth was hers alone. It was during one particularly difficult morning, when Lily excused herself from a meeting and locked herself in the restroom, clutching the sink as waves of nausea overtook her, that the weight of inevitability finally broke through her defenses, Because as she stared at her pale reflection in the mirror, sweat gathering at her temple, hand trembling against her stomach, she whispered to herself words that made her knees weak with both terror and relief. "I think I'm pregnant," and saying it out loud, even in the privacy of an empty restroom, was like unlocking a door she could never close again, because once acknowledged, the thought took root with undeniable force, filling her mind, shaping her reality, shifting her entire perspective. And though she hadn't taken the test, hadn't sought a doctor, hadn't shared the suspicion with anyone else, Lily knew deep down that her body was telling her the truth, that this wasn't just stress, this wasn't just fatigue, this was life beginning inside her. And it was Damon's, and that truth settled over her like both a blessing and a curse, a secret she could no longer run from, only delay in revealing, and the question became not if she realized it, but when she would stop pretending otherwise. And the answer was frighteningly close, pressing in on her with every tick of the clock, every flutter of her knees in her stomach, every glance at Damon that lingered too long, every memory of Kane's possessive glare, every hushed conversation that could turn her life upside down the moment she faltered. And Lily, standing in that restroom with her hand pressed firmly to her abdomen, knew with chilling certainty that the countdown had reached its final stretch, that realization wasn't on the horizon anymore. It was already here, demanding to be faced, demanding to be lived, demanding to be spoken, and soon, very soon, she would have no choice but to surrender to it. And yet even after that whispered confession to herself in the mirror, Lily found a strange paralysis settling over her, as if knowing the truth and acting on it were two separate mountains she had to climb. And she had only just reached the first summit, because what came next would require courage she wasn't sure she possessed, the courage to pull that hidden box of pregnancy tests from her drawer, to face the result she both dreaded and longed for. And though she told herself over and over that information was power, that clarity would free her from the endless loop of uncertainty, she hesitated. Because once the result appeared on that small window, she would no longer be able to bargain with possibility. She would be confronted with reality in black and white, undeniable, unchangeable, irreversible. And something about that finality made her heart pound in her chest like a drum of doom. So instead she went about her day in a fog, slipping into routines, nodding through conversations, pretending that everything was fine even as her body screamed the truth louder with every passing hour. And Damon's name pulsed in her mind like a secret mantra. Damon, 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 the man who had appended her life with one night of passion, the man who had unknowingly left his mark on her future, the man she would have to face not as a lover, not as a fleeting distraction, but as the father of her child, if indeed her suspicions proved correct. And that thought terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her, because for all his charm and intensity, Damon remained unpredictable, carrying shadows that could either protect her or consume her, and Lily wasn't sure which version of him she would meet when she finally spoke the truth aloud. But one thing was becoming clearer with each breath, each restless night, each skipped cycle. The question of how soon she would realize she was pregnant was no longer theoretical, no longer some distant point on the horizon. It was now, it was here. It was pressing in on her so insistently that she felt her very world contracting around it, leaving no space for denial, no space for delay. And Lily knew that if she didn't face it soon, someone else would face it for her, someone else would connect the dots, someone else would see what she had worked so desperately to conceal. And then the choice of timing would be ripped from her hands, the secret no longer hers to hold. And so with trembling fingers, she promised herself that tonight, after the house quieted and the city outside her window faded into silence, she would finally open the box, finally take the test, finally stare down the truth she had been circling for weeks, because the time for pretending was over, the realization was already upon her, and the only question left was whether she had the strength to face what came after.